All right, let's jump into another deep dive. Today, we're taking a look at the business side of hospitals.
Should be interesting.
You bet. Especially with this stack of research you sent over. It's way more complex than I thought at first glance.
Yeah, it's always fascinating to see how hospitals balance, taking care of people with the business side.
Absolutely. And a lot of what you sent focuses on India specifically. Seems like they're going through some pretty big changes over there.
Definitely a rapidly evolving healthcare landscape.
Well, one of the first things that jumped out at me, you often hear that hospitals are a safe investment because people get sick no matter what the economy's doing.
Right, right. There's always that baseline demand.
Exactly. But then I started digging into these sources, and it's like, well, maybe not so simple.
Yeah, it's true that demand for things like emergency care, uh, life-saving procedures, chronic disease management,
Yeah.
that tends to hold pretty steady even during a recession.
Okay. Makes sense. Those are things you can't really put off, right?
Exactly. But your sources highlight a pretty important nuance.
Oh, I'm all ears.
So think about things like elective procedures, knee replacements, cosmetic surgeries, certain dental work.
Ah, okay. Stuff that could maybe wait a bit if things were tight financially.
Precisely. Those areas are way more sensitive to economic fluctuations.
Makes sense. If you're worried about losing your job, a new smile might not be top priority.
Right, right. And this vulnerability to economic shifts, it gets even more pronounced in countries that rely heavily on private health insurance.
Oh, because if you lose your job, you might lose your insurance too.
Exactly. And then suddenly, the hospital's revenue stream takes a hit.
So anyone thinking about investing in healthcare needs to keep this in mind. It's not just a simple hospitals are always a safe bet situation.
Definitely not. You got to look at the specifics, different types of hospitals, how they're affected by these cycles. Nuance is key.
All right, so demand isn't always guaranteed. But what about the process of actually building a hospital? One source compared to building a fortress, and not just because of the size.
Yeah, and they're not wrong. The upfront costs are enormous, especially for a specialized hospital.
I can imagine. Just securing the right location, getting all the high-tech equipment, hiring the staff.
Exactly. It's a massive barrier to entry.
And then there's this thing called the gestation period that one source mentioned. Basically, it can take years for a new hospital to actually become profitable.
That's right. We're talking 5 to 7 years, sometimes even longer. It's not a get-rich-quick scheme.
Not at all. It's more like planting an oak tree. You gotta have patience.
Exactly. Investors need to be in it for the long haul. And for the hospitals themselves, careful planning is critical.
This whole gestation period idea has definitely changed how I think about healthcare investments. It's a different ballgame than something like, say, tech startups, where it's all about rapid growth.
Completely different mindset. Long-term vision is key.
So, starting a hospital is a huge undertaking, but what about the ones that are already established? Our sources seem to agree that in this business, size really does matter. Those big multi-specialty hospitals seem to have a leg up.
Absolutely. And it's not just about being big for the sake of it. It's what that size allows them to do.
Okay, like what?
Well, for example, they can diversify, offer a wide range of services. So you have the high margin specialties like cardiology, balancing out the steady revenue from general care.
Makes sense. Spreading the risk like a good investment portfolio.
Exactly. And that size also gives them leverage when it comes to pricing.
Yeah, they can kind of call the shots, right?
To a certain extent, yeah. They can negotiate better rates with suppliers, attract top doctors, invest in the latest tech. Of course, that can also mean higher costs for patients, whether directly or through their insurance.
It's a complicated equation.
Yeah.
But it seems like patients often end up shouldering those higher costs in the end.
Unfortunately, yeah, that often happens. It really highlights the need for more transparency and regulation in healthcare. We need to make sure hospitals can be profitable, but also keep things affordable for patients.
Absolutely. Speaking of attracting talent, your research highlighted something interesting. Hospitals with medical schools attached to them have a big advantage when it comes to staffing.
It's a huge advantage, like having your own talent pipeline, training the next generation of doctors right there.
And addressing that doctor shortage, which is a problem worldwide, not just in India.
Exactly. So if you were a doctor fresh out of med school, where would you rather work? A small clinic or a major hospital with all the latest tech and a diverse range of patients?
I think we both know the answer to that one.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Large hospitals just offer a more attractive package for ambitious medical professionals. It's a win-win for everyone involved.
Okay, so starting a new hospital is tough, and being big definitely has its advantages. But what about the hospitals that have been around for a while? How does their experience play into their success?
That's where the idea of operating leverage comes in. Think of it like a popular restaurant that's always packed.
Okay, if I'm following.
They have the same space, same overhead, whether they're half full or completely full. But when they're full, their revenue skyrockets.
Right, because their costs are basically fixed, but they're serving way more customers.
Exactly. Mature hospitals, they've already made those big investments in facilities and staff. So once they reach a certain volume of patients, their profits really take off.
It's like the older, the wiser, and the more profitable.
Exactly. They have that advantage built in. But then there's this whole health insurance situation. More people with insurance, that sounds like good news for hospitals, right? More potential patients. Well, it's not quite that straightforward. While it does expand the pool of potential patients, especially in a market like India that's seeing insurance penetration grow, it also introduces a new power dynamic.
How so?
Basically, insurance companies gain more leverage to negotiate pricing with hospitals. It's been a major trend in the US where insurance is dominant, and it seems to be heading in that direction in India as well.
So instead of hospitals setting their prices, they have to play by the insurance company's rules.
To a large extent, yeah. They become what we call price takers with less control over their revenue.
That's a tricky situation. Health insurance is good for giving more people access to care, but it also puts the squeeze on hospital profits.
Absolutely. It's a complex issue with no easy answers. It raises questions about government regulation, the balance of power in healthcare, and how to ensure both quality care and financial stability for hospitals.
Definitely something to think about, especially as we see health insurance expanding globally.
Agreed. It's a trend that's reshaping the healthcare landscape in profound ways. And it's something we'll continue exploring as we go deeper into your research.
Sounds good to me. I'm ready to keep digging. But first, maybe we should take a quick break.
Sounds like a plan.
Back again. I don't know about you, but I'm already looking at hospitals in a whole new light.
Yeah, it's amazing how much complexity there is.
Definitely more than meets the eye.
For sure. And as we dive deeper into this research, there's even more to uncover. Like, remember how we talked about that operating leverage advantage for older hospitals?
Yeah, they've already made the big investment, so once they hit a certain number of patients, profits really start flowing.
Exactly. But there's a potential downside to that, too.
Interesting. What could offset that profit boost?
Well, think about it this way. What if a hospital invests heavily in some, specialized high-cost procedures? That's where they're making their money.
Okay, I'm following.
But then what happens if demand for those specific procedures drops? Maybe a new technology comes along, something less invasive, or maybe government regulations change things up.
So their big investment, like, I don't know, $1 million MRI machine, isn't as profitable as it used to be.
Exactly. It's like putting all your eggs in one basket, a very expensive basket.
Makes sense.
That's why diversification is so important, just like with any smart investment strategy.
So you don't want to rely too much on one particular area.
Right. Having a mix of high-margin specialties alongside those steady streams from general care, that's how you cushion against those market shifts.
So, spreading the risk. Smart. But even with a diversified approach, it seems like hospitals are always walking this tightrope, keeping costs down, but also maintaining quality of care. How do they find that balance?
It's the core tension in the whole industry, and that's where operational efficiency comes in. Remember those metrics your sources mentioned, things like average revenue per occupied bed?
Yeah, ARPOB.
Mm.
And average length of stay, ALS. It did feel a bit like alphabet soup at first.
I know, right? But those numbers, they actually tell a story. They're indicators of how efficiently a hospital is using its resources.
Oh, okay, so like a high ARPOB means they're good at attracting patients who need more complex care, the kind that brings in more money.
Exactly. Strong pricing power. And a low ALOS, meaning patients are discharged sooner, can indicate efficient processes, good coordination of care, good bed management. All of that translates to cost savings.
So they're optimizing every step, from admission to discharge, making sure things run smoothly, keeping those costs in check.
Absolutely. It's about streamlining, eliminating waste, and ultimately delivering value. Not just for the hospital's bottom line, but for the patient too. Get people healthy and back home sooner, that's a win-win.
Speaking of the patient experience, something in the research really resonated with me. It's that feeling of, being at the mercy of the system when you're in the hospital. Like, you're not really in control of your own care.
It's a common feeling, and it highlights the power dynamics at play. When patients are vulnerable, they might not feel comfortable questioning things, costs, treatment decisions, their own needs. they might not feel empowered to speak up.
And that's where those practices the Competition Commission is cracking down on become even more troubling, right?
Exactly. Forcing patients to buy marked up meds from the hospital pharmacy when they could get them cheaper elsewhere, that's taking advantage of people at their most vulnerable.
It feels almost predatory.
It is, and it ties back to that information asymmetry we talked about. The hospital has all this knowledge that the patient doesn't, putting them at a disadvantage. So transparency and patient education, those are crucial.
Absolutely. Patients need to feel empowered to ask questions, understand their options, make informed decisions. It's about their health, after all.
Hmm.
But going back to those anti-competitive practices, some of those fines were huge. Millions of rupees. The government isn't messing around.
Those penalties send a strong message. Regulators are recognizing the potential for abuse, and they're stepping in to protect patients. And those fines aren't just about punishment, they're about deterrence, too.
Right, discouraging other hospitals from doing the same thing.
Exactly. It sets a precedent, fosters a more ethical, transparent healthcare system. But it also raises a question, how widespread are these practices? Are they isolated incidents, or is this a systemic problem?
That's what I was wondering, too.
It's something the Competition Commission is actively investigating, especially when it comes to those big super specialty hospitals. Exclusive agreements with suppliers, inflated prices for in-house services, things like that.
It's like they're peeling back the layers trying to see what's really going on.
Exactly. Transparency and accountability, those are crucial in any industry, but especially healthcare. People's lives are at stake.
Couldn't agree more. Healthcare decisions are often life-altering. Patients deserve to be treated fairly, with respect and transparency. It's about building trust.
Absolutely. Restoring that trust is essential. Okay, so we've talked about the financial pressures hospitals face, the importance of efficiency, the role of regulation, but what about the people actually delivering care? The doctors, nurses, all the medical professionals?
The ones on the front lines making it all happen.
Right. Your sources emphasize that they are a hospital's most